So look, I just want to be honest about today. I'm a little tired. I'll be honest. I had quite the eventful night last night. Went to the casino, lost everything, and now I've got to really make a video so I don't lose. I lost everything. All right, like I lost everything right away. And it's all right though. I mean, cheese it. Can you watch out, please? Cheese it, please. Cheese it, Jesus. It's okay. I got you. Anyway, you know what UFC division I'm a really, really big fan of? I'm a really big fan of the UFC welterweight division. Just something about it. I feel like a lot of divisions are very stacked, but unfortunately the champion seems just so dominant that it's not even really worth gauging how that division's going to play out. But the 170 division is different. That division is stacked top to bottom with killers, and I think every single top contender has a very interesting potential fight with Belal Muhammad. And the news that we have right now is that Leon Edwards versus JDM is basically finalized, which, I mean, holy fuck, is that an amazing fight. And the second I heard that, immediately it was like, okay, well, who the hell is Kamaru Usman going to fight? It's got to be Joaquin Buckley, right? It absolutely has to be. Now, I think these are very intriguing matchups, and I think gauging how any of these guys stack up to Belal Muhammad is even more interesting. Starting off with Leon Edwards versus Della Maddalena. This is such an interesting matchup because I think the Belal Muhammad fight for Leon left a certain impression on most MMA fans. Most MMA fans saw that fight and went, holy shit, Leon Edwards is such a shitty boxer. Like, I thought this guy was a good striker, but the truth is, you close the distance with him, you try to box, all of a sudden he's dog shit. All of a sudden he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. If he can't stay in kicking range, he is literally a giant fucking baby who's just going to get ragdolled by whoever he fights. And of course, you look at Della Maddalena, who is arguably maybe the best boxer in the UFC, period. Of course, I think Ilia Topuria is a bit more devastating. I think he's a bit more dangerous given the sheer amount of power and torque in his shots. But just straight up skill for skill, Della Maddalena in boxing is difficult to beat. But I think this is a very, very, very back and forth matchup for a number of reasons. For one, I think you get a very interesting comparison when you gauge Leon's fight versus Belal and Leon's third fight against Kamaru Usman, because Belal and Usman both had a very similar strategy with Leon, and that was a lot of pressure, try to get into his face, and try to box. Both of them had the exact same strategy, but obviously, both of those fights played out very differently. Of course, Leon Edwards had a fence grab. Leon Edwards fucking had some eye pokes and some ball shots, but I really think those were all beside the point. I think the big difference just came down to the style of boxing between Belal and Kamaru Usman. Belal Muhammad was getting into Leon's face, and he was landing long, short, tight combinations, and this was overwhelming Leon. Leon honestly was landing shots in return, but because Belal was so durable, he just couldn't get Belal to back up. So Belal was in his face, lighting him up with these short combinations, forcing Leon to cover up, which opened up the takedowns. And then you look at Kamaru Usman, and like I just said, Usman had the exact same strategy as Belal Muhammad, but the difference was he was trying to land power shots. He was not landing short, long combinations. He was trying to land heavy jabs, big 1-2s, the occasional sort of winging hook. And this just did not overwhelm Leon the same way. And because of that, he was seeing Usman's takedown attempts coming, and he was able to defend a lot better. Whereas Belal Muhammad was beating him to his hips every single time. He just was not ready for the takedown attempts because he was getting overwhelmed by the short boxing in the pocket. So you look at Della Maddalena, and of course, Jack's game is boxing in the pocket. I mean, he is so fucking good at lighting you up with combinations, going down to the head, to the body, to the head, to the body, over and over and over again. It's very difficult to deal with. I mean, Jack is just the definition of solid fundamentals. That is what it comes down to. He's not overly explosive. He's not super fast, super durable. He's not necessarily a big welterweight, but it is just solid fucking fundamentals. His guard is so tight. He has good head movement. He has very good entries. He checks leg kicks very well. Again, right, you look at somebody like Ilia Topuria. And because Ilya has these certain attributes in terms of power, in terms of explosiveness, he doesn't necessarily need to be as technical. His defense doesn't need to be as perfect. He doesn't need to set up his combinations and his entries quite as well because he can knock you out with one shot at any moment. Whereas JDM, because he was not gifted with these same attributes, he is all around just a fucking technician. But of course, against Leon Edwards, he has a significant amount of height and reach he has to deal with. Well, he's had 2 fights that were so wildly impressive. Against Kevin Holland and against Randy Brown. Both of these guys 6'3", ridiculously long reaches, very good strikers. And you see the way that JDM dealt with the distance. The way, again, he would keep up a very tight guard. He would slip shots very well. He would enter into range, and he just mixes it up from the body to the head so ungodly well. And with the Randy Brown fight in particular, you just see the accuracy of this shot. Right on the chin, immediately rocks him, and then he chokes him out. So look, based on what we saw from the Belal Muhammad fight, I can understand why you would look at somebody with the skill set of JDM and say, oh, Leon Edwards is fucked. JDM is going to close the distance. He's going to get in Leon's face. And then what is Leon going to do? He's going to get overwhelmed in the pocket, just like he did with Belal Muhammad. I'll be honest. I understand the reasoning. I'm not quite so sure about that for a number of reasons. One of which being, of course, Leon Edwards did land on Belal Muhammad, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, he absolutely did. He had moments of landing really good shots in the pocket, but again, Belal Muhammad relies a lot on his durability. I mean, you look just how fucking massive this guy is. He's so goddamn jacked. He is, very saucy. I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, of course he is, and that's not a secret. Just look at him. I am 100% certain that it is my opinion that he is on a lot of steroids. Because again, right, he's a grown man who has gone through puberty multiple times. He is just fucking, look at how fucking cut up and how huge he is. I mean, it's absurd. And whenever I say this, I have to preface, I am not hating. I love steroids. If you are an MMA fighter who is not on steroids, you better get on steroids. I'm just saying it is important to Belal's skill set that we mention this. But again, right, going back to JDM doesn't have this size. He doesn't quite have this same durability. So for one, there is a much higher risk of Leon landing a shot that can actually hurt him. And two, of course, JDM doesn't have the same takedown threat as Belal Muhammad does. Like, for example, when you would look at JDM versus Kevin Holland, there were many moments where JDM was blitzing into range, landing these combinations, and Holland was just giving him his back. He was essentially just turning away from him. JDM could have grappled in these exchanges if he wanted to, but he would choose not to, and he would just go back to range. And when he would be at range, he would struggle with Holland's teeps and his side kicks to the body. Of course, when you're dealing with a very boxing-heavy opponent, if you can keep the fight at kicking range, it is obviously a big advantage. And Leon Edwards is a far, far better kicker than Kevin Holland. The teeps he was landing against Belal Muhammad were very fast, very accurate, just digging him right into the gut. And of course, against Kamaru Usman, the body kicks he was landing were absolutely vicious. I mean, there were many moments in that fight where he was actually really hurting Usman with the kicks to the body. But of course, Leon tried to be very kick-heavy against Belal Muhammad, but he couldn't capitalize on it because he couldn't deal with Belal's pressure. Again, he was getting overwhelmed in the pocket. While JDM is a better boxer than Belal Muhammad, frankly, probably more dangerous. So what's stopping JDM from just getting in Leon's face and staying there, lighting him up with combinations? Well, Leon Edwards is very good in the clinch. He had a few very key moments against Usman where he was on the outside trying to keep the fight in kicking range. Usman would try to close the distance with punches. Leon would meet him all the way in the middle, clinch, and do a very good job landing knees from the clinch. And honestly, he did the exact same thing to Belal Muhammad a few times. That is kind of the perfect game plan against Jack Della. Stay on the outside, throw a lot of teeps to the body, which we know that JDM will struggle with. Every single time that JDM blitzes in with punches, completely close the distance, try to clinch. Because Leon has a height and a reach advantage, it allows him to see JDM coming in, and he has an opportunity here to stuff the boxing, go all the way in. I mean, again, right, Leon Edwards is a very good grappler. For how good Belal Muhammad was, Leon had his moments of reversing him, from taking his back. Like, you cannot take that away from Leon Edwards. Honestly, he might be... it's close, but I think you can argue he's a better grappler than Jack Della Maddalena, and he's not going to fear going to the clinch with him. Again, though, you can really go back and forth with this matchup, because if Jack gets in the pocket, he really only needs to land one accurate shot right on the chin to really hurt you. And we've seen pillow punchers like Nate Diaz do this to Leon Edwards. Crack him right on the chin, really rock him. I mean, look, if Jack Della gets Leon into this position right here, I think Leon's getting finished, and there's no question. Again, I think this is amazing matchmaking. You can go back and forth with this a little bit, but I honestly probably would lean towards Leon Edwards to win this. And now, as I alluded to prior, the only other matchup that makes any sort of sense at welterweight is Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley. Of course, Buckley called out Usman after the Colby Covington fight. It really does just make perfect sense. And of course, Buckley, ever since he's moved down to welterweight, has been a serious problem. I mean, this guy is such a fucking specimen. He's so explosive and jacked and just genetically gifted in every single sense. And he legitimately does, I think, pose some threat to Usman. But I would say in the majority of areas, he probably doesn't do that at all. And I think what it comes down to pretty much is the fact that because Buckley is so yacked and explosive and such a specimen, he does sort of lack when it comes to technical expertise at times. Offensively, Buckley is very dangerous, and he's not a bad striker by any means, but like a lot of jacked, explosive guys are, he is very hook heavy. He's very winging bombs at you heavy because, of course, with the amount of power he has, he's very dangerous in that area. But he's not the best at setting it up. He's not the best at using feints or setting up any traps or landing really tight, accurate shots because he's never needed to be because of how athletic he is. And I think, again, right, he's dangerous, but I think a very good example to take from is the Chris Curtis fight. Now, this fight was at 185, but the big thing to take away from this was Chris Curtis just put on an absolute boxing masterclass against Buckley. Just completely picked him apart with simple, straight shots. I mean, he was just so much more technical. And because Buckley is trying to go after you with these giant hooks, he is open to get hit with straight shots, straight jabs, straight right hands down the middle. And when you look at Usman's game, I mean, this is what he does. Really good power jabs, really good straight right hands. Just in a straight-up striking match, I think Buckley is going to be very open for these kind of shots. Of course, though, where I do think this fight gets interesting is the fact that Usman defensively, I mean, I wouldn't say he's anywhere near Chris Curtis. I mean, Curtis was doing an amazing job blocking pretty much every big shot Buckley had, but Usman, look, he went to war with Colby Covington in both of those fights. Colby Covington would just bite down on his mouthpiece and get on the inside, and he would just wing these giant shots. And he had moments of landing very well on Usman. I think that is where the fight gets a lot more interesting. And, of course, not to mention Gilbert Burns' success just stepping in with giant overhands and landing very cleanly on Usman. I mean, if Buckley is even able to land a third of what Colby Covington landed in their fights, I mean, Usman's in trouble because Buckley has so much more power than Colby Covington does. But on the flip side of this, you look at the takedown defense of Buckley, it did look good against, again, a very old, decrepit, sad Colby Covington. But there were moments where Colby would take a shot that frankly wasn't that well timed. He would push Buckley up against the fence, and he was able to hit this double leg. And Buckley, off of his back, was pretty terrible. I mean, he just let Colby pass right to side control, was able to hold him down for a decent amount of time. This is where I would be very nervous for Buckley. Again, right, Usman's knees are certainly a problem. He ain't shooting these low traditional double legs like a Belal Muhammad, might. But I think that Usman, from what we've seen of him in the past, I think his takedown threat should be a lot greater than Colby Covington. Again, though, it's interesting, right? I feel like most people, as of right now, are just of the mind that Usman is just completely washed, way past his prime, just is not the same guy he used to be. That very well may be true, but I don't know exactly what they're basing that off of. I don't think he looked old and washed against Khamzat Chimaev. I actually think he looked really good based on the circumstances in which he took that fight. So, I mean, look, yeah, it is very possible Usman goes out there and just clearly he's lost a step. Clearly he's just not what he used to be, and he, I guess sort of resembles what Colby Covington looked in the last fight. That is possible, but again, right, for people to be so certain that that is the case, I don't know, right? I remember when I first saw this fight getting discussed, I saw so many people saying, oh man, one kick to the knee and Usman's fucking dead. I'm like, well, look, Joe Rogan has been telling us about Usman walking up the stairs backwards for 9 years now, all right? Like, this is this is not a new thing. This has been a problem, So I don't know. I do think I would lean towards Kamaru Usman to win this fight. But again, right, where he's at physically is a big question mark, and I think that is going to be truly the real decider of how this fight goes. But now, I mean, look, with all of this being said, do these guys, any of them, stand a chance against Belal Muhammad? I mean, look, Leon Edwards, I'll be honest with you, based on his skill set, based on what he does, of course, with some tweaks here and there, he could do a lot better against Belal Muhammad, no question. But I do think that's always going to be a difficult fight for him. I think that Leon Edwards does struggle when you really close the distance with the boxing. And I think that no matter what Belal Muhammad, with his takedown threat, with his back take threat that he has now, it's so hard to stand back up against him if he takes you down. You're going to have to turtle, and he's going to slap that body triangle on you every single time. I just think that, look, for Leon Edwards to be able to win this fight, he needs to keep Belal on the back foot, which he did do the very first time that they fought. But again, Belal with Team Khabib, they really game planned to avoid this at all costs. And I'll be honest, I don't really see a super reliable way for Leon to avoid Belal's pressure. That's going to be the problem. Again, right, I think maybe trying to be a little more kick heavy, getting on his bike a lot more can help. But I will never be super bullish on the opportunity for him to completely turn that fight around. I just think there are some fundamental issues with his game that are going to always be there with Belal Muhammad. Now, Jack Della Maddalena is a very interesting one because, again, right, Belal's game opens up based on his ability to pressure his opponent. This is just what he does. He wants to use his durability to get in your face, pressure you, overwhelm you, which opens up his entire game. Now, I don't know if Jack Della is the kind of guy you want to get in his face. I think Jack is a way more technical boxer. I think that the issue he might have, though, is, right, Belal does such a good job tanking big shots and relying on his durability. I mean, Jack is not a very big power puncher at all. I think he could struggle in that area, keeping Belal off of him. Again, though, right, just in a straight-up boxing match, no matter how much pressure Belal tries to put onto him, Jack is going to be winning these exchanges. He is just way more technical. He has way better counters in the pocket, way more accurate, way more clean in this area. But where I really think he struggles in this matchup, of course, is the takedown threat. Belal Muhammad's double legs are so fucking clean. He shoots them so fluidly, gets his hands locked behind you, and at that point, no matter who you are, that's going to be fucking tough to stop. And I mean, well, you look at the Gilbert Burns fight, Jack did struggle with getting taken down in that fight. Again, right, his scrambling ability from on the bottom is amazing. Again, he's just such a technician everywhere. Does such a good job defending back takes, does such a good job trying to scramble back to his feet, but again, right, he's not a big welterweight. Gilbert Burns, who I would say, of course, his all-around grappling is a bit better than Belal Muhammad's, but he's not the wrestler that Belal is. Belal is a far better traditional wrestler, and Gilbert was getting in on single legs, hitting it, getting in on double legs very deeply, hitting it, and again, you put Jack flat on his back, he's going to have to turtle to stand back up, and Belal does such a good job just getting behind you and just riding you from the back. such a good job from that position. And I just think I really don't see a reliable way for Jack to defend these double leg attempts. I just think that is the real issue for him here. If they were only boxing, it's not close. But unfortunately, they're not. And I just, as we stand right now, I haven't seen enough from Jack to say he's going to be able to defend Belal Muhammad's takedown attempts, prevent the back takes, get up to his feet well. And for that reason, you're going to kind of have to pick Belal Muhammad there pretty handedly. Now, Joaquin Buckley, I think this is a very simple one. Buckley, with the amount of power he has, he is certainly somebody that can stop Belal's pressure. I really don't think Buckley is the kind of guy you want to really get in his face and not back up from, because if he lands cleanly on you, you're going to be in trouble. Again, though, right? Buckley got taken down from this. Belal is a far better wrestler. I mean, even completely on the back foot, Belal will still drop down, hit a clean double leg, put you flat on your back. Buckley off of his back was horrendous against Colby Covington, which I attribute to, again, because he's so athletic and explosive, he's never felt like he's really needed to build really good guard fundamentals. So Belal Muhammad's going to pass your guard. If you turtle at all, he is going to get his back taken. And again, right, I think, of course, Buckley is dangerous. But again, right, I mean, this is really all you got to see. This is not good enough for me to ever pick you to beat somebody like Belal Muhammad. He does a good job negating the pressure, but you also have to be able to prevent the grappling. And I'm not seeing that here from Buckley. But honestly, Kamaru Usman, I genuinely think on paper, out of all of these guys on this list, he's the guy to beat Belal Muhammad. And I truly mean that. Again, right, where his body is at right now is a big question mark. But if he does return to form, which, I would say is the same as he was against Khamzat Chimaev, I think he can win this fight. And I think he can win this fight because he is a more dangerous boxer than Belal Muhammad when it comes to the power punches and when it comes to the straight shots. Again, I think Belal is cleaner in close with the tight shots, the short hooks. But Usman, right, has phenomenal takedown defense. If he just plants down like he always does, is very jab heavy, very straight right hand heavy, it is going to legitimately make it difficult for Belal to pressure him. Right, Belal's double legs are clean, but I think if anybody on this list could theoretically stop it, it would be Kamaru Usman. I mean, look, Khamzat Chimaev clearly really out-muscled Usman. Obviously, it being a weight class up, Usman taking the fight on 6 days' notice, physically seemed not nearly as strong as Khamzat is. And that's just evident in the way that Khamzat hikes this single leg way up into the air. I mean, that right there is all you really need to see to confirm this. So I don't think that comparison is a good one when looking at Belal Muhammad down at 170. I think, again, right, if he does take Usman down, Usman is very susceptible to the back takes. I mean, we saw that against Khamzat Chimaev. Usman is not as good of an all-around grappler as Belal Muhammad is. But really, the takedown defense is what's important here, and I do think the boxing is good enough to prevent Belal from just walking him down. However, I do think one area Belal would have an advantage is his high kicks. Belal's high kicks are not bad. He used them against Gilbert Burns genuinely very, very well. And I think that is the one big advantage he has here. But apart from that, again, right, I think Usman does check the boxes in terms of being big and strong and having the power in his jab and his right hand to negate Belal's pressure. I think on paper, in the welterweight division, he does have very good takedown defense. He could prevent Belal's double legs. And I think that really is, in terms of beating Belal, that is the most important aspect of it for sure. I don't think it's a shoo-in for Usman. I do think, again, we need to see where his body is at. But in terms of all these people on this list, I like Usman's chances against Belal over anybody else.